All right, let's just jump right into this. Andrew Tate.
Long time.
I know, it's been a very long time.
Very long time.
Actually, I met you downstairs at the Ritz.
Correct.
George and I were engaged at the time.
Yep.
And I probably was very swept up in George and barely got time to talk to you, but I do remember you being very polite. So it's interesting to fast forward to today, and you were very much in the UK circuit.
Yep.
Now it seems like your celebrity is kind of really hitting the US market. They're kind of finding you for the first time, digging up a bunch of old clips, and there's a lot of pressure now on conservatives to say something really awful about you.
There seems to be a pressure on everybody on all sides to say something awful about me. I kind of feel like I've been placed in a position where there's always someone attacking me new each day. But I guess I was built for it because it doesn't bother me like it should, perhaps.
You seem to be doing pretty well given the circumstances.
I know the truth in my heart, and I know that what I say is the truth, and I understand very well the internet and how it works, and I also think I'm perspicacious enough to understand there's certainly a degree of weaponized virtue, and perhaps a degree of jealousy, and perhaps a few other things are involved in all of these attacks. I don't believe that people who sit and attack somebody for their past, especially something from so long ago, are genuinely virtuous. I don't think it's about virtue. I think it's about, well, I can get some clicks this way, or I can get some views that way, or he did the biggest interview ever, or whatever it is. There's certainly some other motivations. And I don't want to say water off a duck's back. I don't want to come across as arrogant. However, I do believe that since the dawn of human time, every single king with any kind of empire was constantly at war. And I think if you're going to become one of the most famous people on the internet, you're going to be at war. And you'd be a fool to become massively influential and then cry about the fact that you end up in constant battles. It doesn't matter if you're Napoleon or Charlemagne or Genghis Khan. There's always someone prodding the edges of your empire, trying to find weakness, see what little bit of land they can take. And I think it's always been the same. And right now, I guess you could say, to a degree, I certainly have an empire and I'm massively influential. And there's a degree of, I wouldn't say jealousy, but there's certainly some ambitious people who are trying to damage it. I think that's what it is.
So I did see a mashup clip that we're not going to show because I thought it was unfair. I will say that. Yep. Only because there was no context provided to the clips. It was just an extract of something that you said that 10 years ago. Some of them were literally 10 years ago. Yep. Didn't know what year it was from, didn't know who you were talking to, didn't know what context it was. And I've been victimized online by something like that before, where somebody takes something abstract and says, well, this is what must be what she means, until they're provided the full context of the clip. Yep. And I also take exception to, I think, digging back 10 years. I don't know who could survive that litmus test. I'm 34 years old today. Yeah. 10 years ago, today I speak to my audience, I talk about, they call me puritanical. I talk about, not drinking. Yeah. I think the biggest change has been becoming a mother. And it would really be unfair if we went and found Candace at 24 years old, liberal, dancing at One Oak, and said, well, look at these clips of Candace Owens. Fortunately, I had no cameras in my face 10 years ago. Yeah. You somehow did. So I think it's a bit unfair. I also think that some of the critique that is coming your way is coming from people who are well-intentioned, like they actually don't perceive, maybe perhaps, okay, this is 10 years ago, what the context is, has he changed since? So I will ask the question, and we are going to get into some of those clips. You said you're an open book. Yeah. How have you transformed? I've seen changes just, I think, in the last 5 years. Yep. Who are you today? How have you transformed?
That's a very good question. It's also very important when you talk about Candace from 10 years ago. The idea that you did something 10 years ago, which you would no longer agree with, is one thing. But the second thing, to come along to the conclusion that you now have no value to add to the world would be massively unfair. Right? Everybody changes, and that's fine. I'm not the kind of person who's going to sit and apologize for his past. I believe all's well that ends well. I believe we're humans and we grow and we learn. I'd be a fool and I'd be disingenuous to sit here and pretend I was sorry for something I did in the past. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be very honest to everyone at home. I've talked at length for a very long time about my history and the fact I used to run a webcam business, and I don't feel guilty for that. I know that's maybe what they want from me. I don't feel sorry for that. I've never hurt anybody. It has nothing to do with my current criminal case. Everybody who worked for me was very positive. In fact, my #1 supporter is currently online, and my best lifelong friends and some of the letters I got in jail were from people who worked for me at that time. And I had a business. And I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend that I feel guilty or I feel sorry for that. I'm from a low-income background. I did what I had to do to survive. And truthfully, all in all, being very honest, I don't think what I did was really that bad. And I want to say that, and I know people are going to lose their minds for it. I didn't sell drugs. I didn't kill anybody. I mean, what did I do? I found a gap in the market and I helped some people organize some accounts on an internet website. That's what I did. And they're going to try and criticize me and crucify me for the next 100 years because of it, because of clips that were made 10 years ago. I think it's disingenuous, and I don't think anyone actually really cares about the virtue of it, because nobody who was involved in my life back then is complaining about anything. I think it's just an attack on me. And certainly we learn and we grow and we change, but it's very interesting how hypocritical the idea of looking at somebody's life over such a long period actually is. I mean, we can look at Donald Trump, right, who I'm a fan of. I guess I know you've had your ups and downs with him, but in the conservative sphere, he's pretty well respected. Donald Trump used to own the Miss Universe pageant. Are we going to criticize him? Are we going to crucify him? What about the girls he had in Miss Universe who decided to go on and do Playboy magazine? Is he a bad person now? Why? Now, that's not Christian values, right? People are messy and life is messy and nothing is completely clean. And this idea that you're going to find somebody and 10 or 11 years ago, they did something which might even be slightly distasteful, not even illegal, and you're going to crucify him forever. I just don't believe that's genuine virtue. I think it's just an attack.
I do think what's happening right now is they are wrongly conflating you having run a webcam business, however long it was ago, to the criminal cases happening in Romania. And this is why I interjected in my voice when people were saying, he's not a conservative, he's not a Christian. I don't understand why Christians are giving him a platform.
And I'm very sorry to interrupt. I'm very sorry to interrupt you. But yeah, I will say right now, I would never consider myself a conservative from that standpoint.
Right.
I'm a rational actor. I'm a reasonable person. I'm intelligent. I use my brain. And I guess that makes me align with many conservative issues overall, because the other side have lost their minds. I don't wake up and stand there as a conservative figure. I don't consider myself a conservative figure. I've just ended up aligning with them on a lot of core issues because I'm a forward-thinking, rational person. But I'm certainly not I don't stand up and say, hey, I'm a conservative. I'm not interested in whether the conservative want to embrace me from that perspective or not. I have no interest in that. I wasn't even particularly political until my recent debacle, where I realized a lot of things about the world and how avoiding politics will not save you, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one of the things I pointed out. I said, he's never said he was conservative. He is not identifying as a Christian. So why are we suddenly using that as whether or not a Christian, a conservative, can put him on a platform and talk about something that is relevant? And something that is relevant is whether or not you are being wrongly or unfairly persecuted by a government.
Yeah.
I have spoken on my platform after examining the charges against Harvey Weinstein. He's clearly not a conservative. He's about as far left as it really gets.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I don't have an interest in whether or not he's guilty or not guilty, and whether or not he was persecuted because of a overtly political movement like Me Too. So I do not like that these things are being conflated, but I want to park that aside because we are going to get into your case and just stick with what you just said about the webcam business. So you say you don't have any guilt for it.
I'm not sorry. I don't operate in that frame. I don't think it's an intelligent way for a man to go through life to say, I'm sorry. At a younger age, I did the best I could possibly do, and I did the best I believed at the time. And you grow from it and you learn, and perhaps there's times in your life where you look back and think, well, maybe I would have done this differently, because hindsight's always 20/20. But every rapper sold drugs. Like, you get to a certain stage in your career where you no longer sell drugs and you don't do it anymore, but that's part of the life journey, and life's messy. And I'm not going to sit here and apologize to any conservative who wants to sit me down and try and give me some moral high ground garbage. I'm not going to listen to it. I had a very rough upbringing, a very tough life, and it could have been so much worse in so many ways. I've done nothing illegal. I've never hurt anybody. Everybody who was involved in my life back then are massive supporters of me. And I think it's very hypocritical for someone to sit, look at a situation they were not involved in and don't understand, look at old clips taken out of context, and then tell me and a whole bunch of people who were in my life who were all perfectly happy that something bad happened or something wrong happened. I don't think that's genuine. And for that reason, I'm not going to sit and be preached to by these people who are imperfect themselves. Everybody's imperfect. And another thing that's really important, we talk about Christian values. I also think that I find it very interesting and ironic that I'm somehow the problem, and that these Christians feel like they need to come and attack me now in the name of Christian values. I think Christianity has much bigger problems than Andrew Tate and some old clips. I think they have much bigger problems that are happening in their churches on a daily. I think you can go to a Christian church in a lot of America and be very disappointed in what you've seen. I don't think I'm the problem with Christianity. And yeah, it's very interesting. But there was a webcam company, and I've talked about it at length on many different podcasts. I had a business. Many girls on there were perfectly fully clothed and would paint pictures or sing and dance and laugh. I've talked about this at length. I've had nothing to do with it for 10 or 11 years, and nobody was ever hurt. And I am not sorry for it. I don't see why I should be.
Okay. So the way that I read you, and you can definitely let me know if I'm wrong, obviously, because you are you, is that people that don't come from a lot, me and you, obviously, obviously have different decisions that lay before us in life than people that come from everything, or people that come from a very stable household, 2 loving parents. And this kind of gets into the dilemma. I remember years ago, Tomi Lahren had said something, she's a political commentator in the US, had said something to the effect of, well, you know, Jay-Z used to sell crack. And he sort of laughed.
And he probably did.
And he did. And he sort of laughed this off. And I remember looking at that because I looked up to Jay-Z's music so much, you know, and I looked up to him because it made it possible for me to change my circumstances. You're looking at this guy who comes from nothing. He came from the projects, he sold drugs, and then he doesn't have to sell drugs anymore. And he's now talking about ideas and talking about business. So I was able to more closely understand and go, okay, I can actually climb out of these circumstances, even though I wasn't born, you know, with a ton of wealth and a lot of opportunities that some people were. And I think it's very difficult for people that don't come from nothing to understand that, and they're so sure that if they were in desperate circumstances that they would still never do anything.
But this is their massive mistake, and you're right, but this is their massive mistake. The reason I have such huge affinity with the youth of the world today, especially the masculine youth, is 1, because a lot of them are disenfranchised, which is one conversation, but 2, also the reason my reach is so global, the reason I have so many fans in Slovenia and Southside Chicago, and I've had kids from Ulaanbaatar come up to me, Mongolia, all around the world, is because I speak to the disenfranchised, and part of that is always going to be, or is going to involve, financially disenfranchised. I'm someone who comes from absolutely nothing and made himself into something. And unfortunately, there's a rocky road sometimes, like you just described with Jay-Z, to get that done. But if I would have been born into a perfect family, like you said, 2 loving parents, family was rich, white picket fence, and I was saying all the same things, then they wouldn't have the same affinity. So if you look at even a lot of superheroes, you look at Batman, he's a flawed person. And I think the reason I'm seen as a hero and the reason I have the fan base I have is because to a degree I've always been a flawed person, and I'm not a perfect human, and I don't want to be. And I think that actually adds a lot of credibility to my character as a whole, that I've become the kind of person who believes he can add value to the world. And just like you said with Jay-Z, he changed. And the biggest thing for me personally, though, truthfully, and I want the whole world to understand this, I've been forensically analyzed by multiple different federal agencies from different countries for the last 17 months, analyzing every aspect of my entire life across the last 10 to 15 years. And what did they find? An old YouTube clip? That's the worst they could find. No sexual perversion, no drugs, no genuine criminal acts. They found something semi-immoral in a YouTube clip. And I would actually challenge anybody who wants to throw stones at me to go through the same level of scrutiny I have been under. And let's see what they find in your life. Because I guarantee anyone who's watching this right now, you sit there, you have a secret in your closet, you have a skeleton that you don't want anyone to know about, and they would have found it. So what's the worst thing that they found about me, considering I've been the most attacked man in the world for 17 months? An out-of-date YouTube clip? An out-of-context YouTube clip? Is that the worst? I think it's crazy that people aren't even sitting there and going, okay, this guy's been absolutely attacked and from every single angle, and this is the worst they could possibly drag up.
Right. No, I agree with you. So the question I would ask you, though, because obviously you've moved away from that business, the thing I find to be the most interesting about you is that younger boys love you. Yes. They absolutely, like the 12, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, I have not come across a 12, 13-year-old boy who's not just an Andrew Tate stan. And I think it's remarkable. It gives you a lot of power. And I think this is perhaps the interest that a lot of people have in you is, what are you going to do with this power, right? You have all of these boys, they believe in you, they stand up for you. And that is why it becomes important to state, I'm not sorry that I lived this. I don't think I would say that I'm sorry for anything decisions that I made when I was young either, because this is the deck of hands that I was given. What do you want me to do? But at the same time, I do try to, now knowing that I have such a following of a lot of young ladies that follow me, say like, listen, I did the idiot stuff so you don't have to.
Power and responsibility go hand in hand. And that's the thing that's so interesting, these out-of-date clips, and they want to talk about these things from 10 years ago. At the time when I was talking to camera, those videos were made for private circulation initially. Secondly, I wasn't trying to educate the world on anything back then. I didn't have the kind of power and influence I have back then. The way you say something to a video which has 50 viewers has to be different than the way you say something to a video that has 50 million viewers. Power and responsibility absolutely go together, and I understand that very well, and I understand the power I have. And I do believe I'm now an absolute force for good in the world, and I'm far more careful with how I'll project myself with certain ideas. Absolutely agree, completely. But that's the thing that's even so crazy about all of it. These old videos that everyone's so concerned about wouldn't even circulate if my haters weren't constantly trying to use them against me. They'd be disappeared into the history of the internet. I don't know where these things come from. I don't know where they were found. I don't know where they are. It's kind of crazy. A lot of people are making all these constant attacks on me, and I don't watch a lot of it. I'll have to be honest with you, Candace. I don't watch all of it, but a lot of the videos are so outdated. The only reason they even exist now is because my haters are so desperate trying to take me down. They don't have any concern for them being seen because they wouldn't be circulating them otherwise. So yeah, absolutely. Power and responsibility go hand in hand. And I do believe that I now have a huge platform, and with young boys, they're exceptionally interested in my case. I do believe to a degree I'm an anti-hero. I do believe to a degree that the harder I'm attacked, the more credibility is given to me in the eyes of my fans. I think that they see, everyone's out to get this guy. Everyone was out to get Batman. This kind of feels that way. And I do try and lead everyone down a good path and say extremely positive things. And I don't think anybody is finding any clips from the last 5 to 6 years which have anything negative in them.
Right. I think you've changed. That's why I said over the last 5 years, I think there's been a seismic shift. And speaking to boys, the younger boys, I think one of the things that they're really suffering from, I get tons of responses rather unexpectedly whenever I talk about the topic of pornography on my show. And it's one of those things that, again, if you found Candace 10 years ago and you asked me about pornography, and by the way, this was actually implanted into my head from a health school, like from health education, where they would say pornography is healthy, people should watch pornography, people should engage in pornography, it's okay if you're in a relationship for you to watch pornography. And then I had a huge wake-up call when I spoke to Tim Ballard, he runs Operation Underground, and then I realized how closely pornography is related to human sex trafficking.
Real sex trafficking, not TikTok
sex trafficking. And yeah, we should talk about that because they are kind of stretching the definition of sex trafficking in your case. I've taken a look at it. And what's remarkable to me is the amount of young men, and I would say from the ages of 18 to 35, that write in and say how much they're struggling with porn, how much they're struggling with pornography addiction, how they feel that no person is talking about the ills of pornography. And so I just watched this clip of you this morning, sitting next to Adam, 22.
You were ever interested in doing your first ever double penetration scene that me and Lena, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like,
yo, dude,
would he be a suitable candidate? Would you,
Andrew Tate,
can I tap him in?
I don't know. No. He looks built.
Hold on, can I fill in real quick? Andrew,
you're out. Aiden, we can't put you. You're not in this conversation anymore.
Fair enough. Go ahead, Andrew. Would you double penetrate her, bro? Would you do that, Andrew? Go ahead. Finish the answer question.
All pop together, is that chill?
There's absolutely 0% chance of that happening. And it's not because Lena is particularly unattractive. It's because she's married to Adam, and I have no interest in degenerate, pointless sex, and I have no interest in making a spectacle of myself or even just involving myself in anything which I deem to be overall haram and pointless. That's just not something I'd be interested in. There's not a single amount of money on the planet you could pay me to undertake. So
you were very polite. I'm not going to be so polite. I thought he was an absolute degenerate. And I mean that the idea of having a woman making the vows that you make in marriage and literally offering her body as he did to you was a form of degeneracy. And you were being very nice and measured. And I think that for that moment, that was the best thing that you possibly could have done.